So following up from part 1 of my Bath Trip Cottagecore extravaganza thing, where I made some simple paneled skirts, this is going to be part 2, where I make some bodices to go with them. So if you've been around for a little bit, you may remember the cursed vest. So basically, I wanted to make a cute hobbity vest, and it was an absolute nightmare. This project was cursed! Like, everything went wrong. I mean, it didn't fit right, and the sewing process was a disaster, and just overall it was kind of a rubbish experience. Like, 0 out of 10, would not recommend. Now, for that project, I had wanted to use a Butterick pattern. I think it was Butterick B4669. But I wasn't able to find it anywhere for a decent price. And then after making that video, I managed to get my hands on it for just under £10. So I thought this video would be a really great time to look back at the cursed vest and do a bit of analysis on what went wrong and what I could have done to make the final product more flattering. Because I think it's important that we learn from our mistakes. And oh boy, were there mistakes in that project. I mean, spoiler alert, but the bodices that I made in this video were a lot more flattering than the cursed vest. One of them was a very similar shape. This one is not. This is also a bit of a spoiler. This is the finished product. They both ended up being a lot nicer than the cursed vest. I do like them a lot more. So let's take a look at what went right this time and what I've learned from both projects. So before we get to that, let's do a little cost breakdown of my materials for this project. Right, I'm gonna put them over here. So for my fabric, I used a reversible duvet cover that I had picked up at a charity shop for around £6. It's just plain cotton fabric. And I made both bodices reversible, so technically there was no lining fabric, just fashion fabric on both sides. I also bought some cheap satin ribbon to use for binding and lacing, you can see. And I got that on sale for £1. It was literally like a roll for £1, which was great. I decided to interface my bodices with canvas that I already had in my stash, which I got for about £4. And I boned it with zip ties that I already had. The original pack that I got was £7 for a pack of 100. And then the pattern, like I said, was just about £10. So all in all, I spent £17 for 2 bodices, or if I'd had to buy my materials new, it would have been £28. So overall, fairly cheap. I think that that's a reasonable price. And a lot of that was the pattern as well. I tend to work with really cheap materials, but buy good patterns, so do with that information what you will, I guess. So with all of that out of the way, let's get to sewing. So I did actually make both views A and C for this project. I ended up only filming view C because I was a bit short on time. I started by tracing off the pieces for the views that I wanted. I was slightly between sizes, so even before getting to the mock-up, I graded my pieces up through the waist so that the waist was one size up from the bust, because that was just what worked with my measurements. And then it was mock-up time. Okay, so this is view C. I don't know why I started with C instead of A, but here it is. Now I've literally taped zip ties onto one side to see if I want boning in this. I was pretty sure I would want boning in it just because I like the feel of a more structured bodice. I think that would be nice, and I am just going to probably use zip ties, but yeah, when I pull this all taut, the size that I graded up to, the waist is still like ever so slightly too small. But I think that's okay for a corset, and hopefully once I lace it, it will be more evenly distributed. Sorry, I'm just trying to because this side, with the boning, looks much better because obviously that boning is keeping that front bit straight, and when I pull it taut, I can feel that it's on my waist. I think this fits really well with the boning. I think without the boning, I would risk a repeat of the cursed vest because I think it just wouldn't have enough structure to lay nicely. So yeah, I think we're gonna go boning, and I'm gonna use zip ties because I'm cheap. I like that it comes down past my waist because I think that's a good look on me. It kind of elongates my waist, my short waist. I'm short-waisted, did you know? I say it in every video, so you must know. This non-boning side, hate it. Boning side, love it. Let's do the zip ties. So then I cut all the pieces out of my fabric and canvas. And I flatlined the canvas to one of the fashion fabrics. It doesn't really matter which one because it's going to be reversible, and I took out the basting stitches at the end. I pinned the pieces together, matching the notches, and took it to the sewing machine. sewed the other fabric the same way, just without flatlining it with canvas. I pressed open my seams, clipping the more curved ones. This is one of my favorite tricks, by the way. If you don't have a tailor's ham, a rolled up towel will do the trick in a pinch. It's not as good as a tailor's ham, but it will do. When you're pressing those curves, it helps to do it over a curved surface so that you kind of maintain the shape of that curve and you're not trying to press something flat that's not supposed to be flat in the first place. So then I sandwiched all the layers together and I stitched along the front and the top edges of the bodice with the wrong sides together, so as it's going to be in the finished product. And then I finished the raw edge with the satin ribbon, felling it down on both sides. So next I marked out my boning channels using a heat-sensitive pen. Why did I say that like I'm a Southern American? A heat-sensitive pan. Sorry. Get it together, Rashali, come on. So next I marked out my boning channels using a heat-sensitive pen. Good job. So I put one boning channel on each seam and then an extra one at the front to reinforce the eyelet area. And I sewed the channels on my machine without cutting the thread. I just flipped the bodice 180 degrees to make things easier. And then I ironed the bodice to remove the pen marks. I measured the zip ties and cut them down to length and then sanded the rough edges. For the binding, I cut a really long piece of the ribbon and ironed it in half to make it easier to line up with the edge of the bodice. And then I bound the whole top edge, inserted the boning, and then bound the bottom edge. I marked the placement of my eyelets and traced around an empty spool for a stitching guide. And then I pierced the eyelets with an awl and stitched them by hand. I used a buttonhole stitch for this. I don't always, but for some reason I decided to torture myself, I guess. It wasn't that bad, actually. I do like buttonhole stitches, and they are good for, like, reinforcing the inside, but I have done eyelets with a whip stitch before, and it turns out pretty much the same. Okay, so where did I go wrong with the cursed vest? I think the first problem was the pattern. So for the cursed vest, I used a free pattern that I found online, and I don't think it was entirely the fault of the pattern. Like, someone worked hard on the pattern and put it online for free, so I don't want to put too much blame on it. But one of the issues was that it just didn't have a lot of size options, so the smallest size was still a little bit too big on me, and then I had to do a lot of alteration and tailoring that I didn't have the skill for. So it's really more about me not being able to alter the pattern. And this go around, I used the Butterick pattern, and I trust Butterick, and I've used their patterns before, and for me, I find them to be quite true to size. Now again, that's not going to be true for everyone, and even here I was kind of in between sizes, so I did have to alter it slightly anyway. I've just noticed that this bow has been like sideways the whole time. That's probably really annoying. But yeah, generally for me, Butterick patterns tend to work well and be flattering on me. So again, I think that's gonna be different for everybody. Because also the pattern that I used the first time wasn't even for the type of bodice I wanted. It like buttoned in the front and it was longer, and so I had to alter it to make it lace in the front, and there was bound to be room for error there. So lesson one, if you're not sure how to alter patterns, if you don't have the skill for that, you want to find a pattern that's as close as possible to what you actually want. And the Butterick pattern ended up being a lot better for me. I would love to try that pattern again, the original free one, and make an actual vest, because honestly it was kind of, it was a fun look. It wasn't what I was going for, and altering the pattern to make it what I wanted was where I went wrong, I think, because I just didn't have the skill. So the next issue was fabric choice. Now for the cursed vest, I used just one layer of like plain old cotton canvas. This was a bad choice for many reasons. Canvas is fine for a mock-up, but the one I picked, it really just did look cheap. And there's no way to get around that. I think because it was such a like matte fabric, it just didn't look like a finished product. And then one layer without boning is not gonna have much structure to it. This wasn't like a stiff canvas that could hold its own shape. It was quite drapey for a canvas, honestly. And so the final product ended up having like a lot of wrinkling and just overall it was kind of shapeless. And so I think a lot of that came down to the fabric that I picked. So this time I used 3 layers and I still had the canvas in there for some structure, but the outer layers are cotton. And I think layering the fabrics made the bodice look a lot more finished, whereas the canvas alone just kind of looked like a mock-up. But this fabric, even though it's a bed sheet, I still feel like this is something I would actually want to wear. Canvas just felt a bit too simple for what I wanted, whereas this has got some pattern to it and it looks a bit nicer. So next, boning. I didn't bone the cursed vest because I didn't think I needed to, but in hindsight, boning helps all the pieces sit in the right place. It gives it structure that you just can't get with fabric alone. And I wanted the bodice to have a really nice shape, and boning helped a lot with that. Like, I really love the shape of this. I like the structure of this a lot. I think I didn't realize with the cursed vest what I actually wanted it to look like. I think even if I got it out of whatever pile I have put it in the depths of hell of my wardrobe, even if I found it and put the boning in along the seams, I think it would actually probably look a lot better. I still don't think I would wear it just because the fabric still, it's not my favorite thing, but it might at least help it have some structure, whereas I felt like it was really just quite shapeless. And finally, the binding. Now, granted, I had a lot of issues with the binding on the cursed vest that weren't entirely my fault. I had gotten some really damaged binding that kind of gave me trouble, and it was also too narrow for my purposes, so that made binding the edges really tricky. I much preferred binding the bodices with ribbon. I did have to do the whole thing by hand, so all of the top edge and the arm size, the bottom edge, the front edge, all of that I had to do by hand and felling it down on both sides, which was tedious. That's why I didn't film a lot of it. But I think I preferred that to the trouble that I had with the binding on the cursed vest. And also because these are reversible, I kind of had to fell it on both sides by hand anyway. Like, even if I had done a traditional bias binding, I probably would have sewn it by hand on both sides just because there's room for error with the machine, I think. It was fine once I got into the swing of it, and it definitely gave me some good practice if I ever decide to make stays in the future and you have to like bind all of those tabs by hand essentially. Lots of good practice for that. What is this? This is what kind of thumbs up is this? Lots of good practice for that. Now, are these bodices perfect? No, definitely not. They've got their own issues, I'm not gonna say, but they're not cursed, and that's the important thing, is there's gonna be issues with anything I make because I still consider myself kind of a beginner, but they're not cursed. Yeah, as far as problems with it, I did have some trouble with the boning kind of poking through the bottom, so when I stitched it, I stitched along the top edge, I think, and bound it. And then I inserted the boning, and I wish at that point I had stitched along the bottom edge as well, stitched along the seam allowance and then bound it. Especially once I had sanded down the boning, it would have probably not cut through those stitches. The stitches would have helped it stay in place. But with just the binding on the bottom, they are kind of poking through because it's quite cheap satin ribbon and they're just kind of poking through. I also think these are like still a little bit small in the waist, and I knew that, and that's why I graded up the pattern, but they're still a little bit small. Like, I can't get an even lacing gap. I just have more room at the bottom than I should. And that's just fine. It's not a huge deal. And they do like feel supportive as far as like a corset goes, but yeah, they're just a little bit tight in the waist, but that's fine. I think I should have put an extra bone on each side. I'm gonna try and show you. So this side panel is just one piece and it kind of wraps around like this. I wish I had put a bone here because I feel like there's quite a lot of wrinkling there, and I think just having a bone right along the side would have helped it have a little bit more structure and kind of pulled it in here and given me a little bit more shape here, which I think I would have liked. And now it's a bit late to add a bone because I've got the binding on and everything, and I don't think I would unpick it just to add one bone to each side. Yeah, I just think it would have helped the overall shaping, but it's fine. And in the end, these are a huge improvement over the cursed vest. I like them a lot more than I liked the cursed vest, which is why I keep calling it the cursed vest, because it was. So what lessons have we learned? Number 1, your pattern is important. Choose something you know you can work with at your skill level. Number 2, your fabric choice is important. Choose something you're actually gonna want to wear. Number 3, boning is important. If you want any kind of structured look, you're probably gonna want to bone it. And finally, don't by damaged binding. And also make sure it's the right width for whatever you're working on. That was half on me and half on me, because I was cheap and I wanted the free binding even though it was damaged. I could have just bought actual binding. So that was on me. And of course I had a lot of other disasters while making the cursed vest. I mean, like, my sewing machine up and broke on me. But I still think I learned a lot from that project, and from this one as well, from remaking or making a similar garment to the cursed vest and learning what made this one better. So thank you for coming along with me on this bodice making adventure. I hope it was fun for you. It was fun for me, and I will see you next time.